what I find most exciting about it is there's always something to learn. So I guess I'd never get bored in cooking because there's always something to read, or a new technique, or a new type of sauce to do, or there's so much opportunity. So I love that part of it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Southern Tasmania is a region now widely celebrated for its incredible produce and a lifestyle built around appreciating the bounty of nature. What's it like growing up in an environment like this with access to the most stunning produce, and what impact does it have on forging a career in food? Lilly Trewartha is the chef and owner of LT Events in Tasmania. Lilly, how are you?
Good, thanks, Huck. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to get you on the show. You branched out just recently with LT Events, your own business. What's it been like getting that started?
Oh, it's been very different to the world of restaurants. I guess with COVID and everything over the last few years, I kind of stopped and I looked at how I wanted to cook, and I decided that I wanted to take a little bit of a break from restaurants, but I definitely didn't want to take a break from cooking. So I decided that doing my own events and creating experiences and dinners for different people would be a nice way to still keep that connection.
What surprised you about that shift and move into that sort of event space?
Well, I think it's very funny having a lot of free time. I think I've spent my entire career in restaurants, and it's fast paced, you're always moving, you're always working, and I am not used to stopping. So I've found it quite funny having free time. Like I'm doing events probably once or twice a week at the moment, which is great, but that also leaves me with 5 days where I'm not working. So I'm exercising, I'm creating ceramics, I'm doing lots of hobbies and seeing friends, and it's a whole new world, and I'm really enjoying it.
You grew up in Southern Tasmania, and Tasmania is renowned for its incredible produce. Take us back to when you were young. Tell us about what it was like growing up there, and sort of the role that food played in your family. I
feel very fortunate to have had the upbringing that I had. I think it was idyllic in a lot of ways. I grew up about an hour south of Hobart, so in a very small place that not many people have heard of called Gordon. As a kid, my parents had quite a few acres, and my mum is an incredible gardener. So we had vegetables, fruit, like every type of apple, stone fruit, berries, all growing there. We also raised some animals, and my childhood was fishing for flathead in the channel with my dad, or we'd go over to Bruny Island and pick mussels and oysters and cook them on the fire at the beach. So food was always a very big part of my upbringing, and very grateful for my family and the way that I was raised.
If you think back to that sort of time when you were growing up and that connection you had with produce, how far has Tasmania come in regards to produce and restaurants and food since sort of you've been part of that?
I think it's come a very long way. Looking back, obviously my upbringing was great, but I think that's not what a lot of people in Tasmania had. And I think Mona and Garage East, when they first opened, it sort of brought a different feeling to Tassie. There was a lot of hype around the produce, and I think it was being seen for the first time by people who weren't in Tasmania. And I think it really launched the platform of that becoming what we're known for now. Garage East, for the food that it created, was incredible, and then Franklin not long after, Fico, Diamaker. There's some incredible restaurants down here now that 10 years ago they wouldn't have ever been.
When did you first start getting interested in food and thinking of it as a possible career?
Well, I guess given the way that I was raised, we always ate well at home. It wasn't fancy by any means, but my mum's a really good cook, and we always ate produce from the garden, and it was always so delicious, and I loved being a part of that. So I think it sort of definitely, from an early age, I appreciated where food came from and what it took to raise and grow your own food. So it was always a part of my life and what I thought I wanted to do. But to be honest, when I was about 15, I started working as a kitchen hand. And I kind of hated what I saw in kitchens. Like, I didn't appreciate, or I didn't like what I saw in, there was, the place I was working was quite misogynistic, and I guess it was before that before the era where we're kind of coming into nicer kitchens, for lack of a better word, and I didn't really want that to be my lifestyle. So it deterred me a little bit, to be honest, and I decided to go to uni. So I enrolled into uni to study marine biology and journalism. My dream was to write about the ocean. And I was like, I'm going to take a gap year. I don't want to go straight to uni. So I went to Lord Howe Island, where I'd been on a holiday before as a kid, and I loved it over there, and I did my dive master training and spent a season over there teaching diving. And when I was there, I met this chef, Kim, who now runs Cherry Moon in Sydney. And it was the first time that I'd met a chef who was passionate, engaging. It changed the way that I viewed cooking. So I decided to move back home and start an apprenticeship. And I guess it kind of clicked me back into what I'd always known, but I think I just needed to be put back on that path.
Take us back to that sort of first step into the industry. What was it like in the commercial kitchen for you, and do you have any stories of that time?
I think I was very lucky in the first step that I took into kitchens. So I was tossing up whether doing an apprenticeship in Sydney, in some connections that Kim had, or coming back to Tasmania. And I got an offer to come back and do my apprenticeship at Peppermint Bay, which at the time had just been taken over by David Moyle. So Ben Lindell was managing it, and I'd worked for him sort of on and off in the kitchen as a kitchen hand and on the floor. And it kind of was in that period of changing where he was bringing down Dave, and he was trying to create, I guess, a new environment down there. So I decided to take a job there, and it was, I was blown away at the start. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. Peppermint Bay was quite a busy restaurant, so what Dave was cooking at the back was the stackings, which was a very small, very intricate, delicious local produce menu, and the front was more of a bar and restaurant that serviced locals, and it was pumping. It was so many like fish and chips and pizzas, but I guess you had to be methodical in the way that you worked, because you do 140 for lunch some days. So I guess I learnt very fast how to prep a lot. But I guess it wasn't really the type of food that I wanted to do. I guess I was working on one side of the kitchen, and I was always poking my head over and sort of seeing what Dave was doing over the other side, because it was more the style of food that I kind of knew straight away that I wanted to be a part of. And Peppermint Bay closed every month for a year, every year for a month for holidays, because of where it was. It was just easier for everyone to have their holidays at the same time. And I'd only just started. I think I was 4 months into my apprenticeship, and I said to Dave, like, I don't really want to take a month off. I was going over to Japan to visit my sister for 2 weeks, but I had this 2 weeks free, and I guess I'd just started, so I had a lot of momentum and I wanted to keep it going. So he's like, I've got a friend, Ben Shuri, he's got a restaurant in Melbourne, just go do a stage there. So little me being in a kitchen for 4 months ended up staging at Attica, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen. It completely changed the way I thought about food, and I'm very grateful for that starting process.
Take us into that kitchen at Attica. Do you have any stories of working with Ben?
I was only there for 2 weeks as a stage, so I didn't have a huge amount to do with Ben, but every time I did see him, he was always really lovely and really engaging. I think like being in that kitchen, you know, the jobs I was doing they seemed so ridiculous at the time. Like I was peeling the outer layer of radishes, like the membrane between the skin and the radish. I was picking thyme with tweezers, I was doing, you know, killing marron to order and poaching it. Like it was just this whole new world of things I'd never seen, but also the precision. I really enjoyed how precise and accurate everything was weighed. Everything was to the gram. Like there was these little eggs I had to fill up with like a caramel, and it had to be 50 to 52 grams. If it wasn't, they wouldn't serve it. So I kind of really appreciated that. So I think, I guess to Dave's detriment, he did a really great thing by exposing that side of things to me. But when I went back to Peppermint Bay, I didn't really want to be there. So that was around the time that Garagist was in Hobart, and I had a friend who was working there on the floor, and she was like, "Oh, come in," and I went in for dinner, and I was absolutely blown away. So I kind of just asked, I was like, "Oh, can I just come in and hang out?" So I went in on my days off at Peppermint Bay, and I'd go in and do prep days up at Garagist, and I think I was doing that for about a month, and then Luke and Will just said, "Do you want a job?" So I did, and I think, it was, I think still to this day, the most engaging and best restaurant I've ever worked in.
Wow, it made such an impact on dining, not just in Tasmania, but it got the attention of the whole of Australia. Take us into that kitchen. Do you have any stories of those connections that you fostered?
I think it has definitely shaped so much of how I think about food today, but also the connections along the way. I've met up over the last 10 years with Luke and Will all around the world and done pop-ups and events with them. And I think I feel very fortunate to have had, Dave and then Luke and Will as mentors, I guess. But the kitchen itself in Garagist was, I don't really know how to describe. Will and Luke together were this incredible team. So Luke Burgess was the owner and head chef, and Will moved down from the UK, and he had trained in very classic, strict UK kitchens. So the way that he prepped and organised was incredibly methodical. And I think from what I witnessed and my experience there, it was so great to see this perfect match between the two of them. So, Luke was this incredibly creative mind. I still think of some of the dishes that he came up with, and how did you get there? Like, how did you think that those flavours would work? But they do, and they're truly delicious. So he kind of would go and source ingredients and have all these ideas and bring them back, and Will would have, I guess, the incredible knowledge and technical ability to bring it together, and like they'd work on the dishes together. And I just remember watching that relationship between them and just thinking how incredible it was.
Where did your experiences through Garagist take you after that?
From Garagist, so they decided to sell the restaurant when I was still working there. And they kind of said, they got all the team together and they were like, it could sell, it could be 3 months or 3 years. So, we're not really sure, but we just want everyone to be in the loop. They were incredible bosses like that. So I, at that time, with my connections on Lord Howe and doing my diving over there, got offered a job to go and do the last bit of my apprenticeship over there. And I thought, I guess I didn't want to turn down that opportunity and Garagist sell next month. So I decided to take the job, and I left, and it was bittersweet. Like I loved it so much, but I guess I wasn't sure how long it would be there for. So I decided to take a step and to go do something different. So I ended up on Lord Howe, which it was an absolute world away from garages. Luke going and picking up ingredients every day to having a boat that only came every 2 weeks. It was a definite culture shock for me. And I guess working with those two incredible chefs and the whole team there, I think I really realised how good it was and how lucky I was to be there. And Lord Howe was amazing for other reasons, but I think I had to learn to let go that it wasn't going to be that type of kitchen for me, and I don't think many kitchens were. So yeah, I kind of made that move to Lord Howe, and then, I don't know, just over the years I ended up at Franklin for a while, back working with Dave, and over the last few years I've done a pop-up called Izakaya Temporary, which I ran with Luke. And I moved over to London and helped Will open Peg, which was his second restaurant after Bright. So I guess those connections for the start of my career have really infiltrated all the decisions I've made up until now, which is pretty lucky.
How different were the kitchens and also the produce in the UK at Peg compared to what you were used to?
I think produce was incredible. I do think it was mostly the meat that I found to be better over there. I think vegetables and stuff in Tasmania, I still haven't really seen better. Like there's something special about the produce that grows down here. But I do think that sometimes poultry is lacking. So when we were in Peg, we were doing a lot of yakitori. We got so much chicken in. It was all corn-fed, delicious free-range chicken, and it was incredible to cook with it. It was something so different to what I'd experienced. Also guinea fowl, really amazing pork. So that was great. And seafood. It was very different to have fish like turbot. Something that we just don't get down here. It's very, very different. The kitchens itself, again, I think I was lucky. The guys from the We Are Noble group, so Will, Phil and Liam, were all great, and I think they really were trying to champion a work-life balance and kind of change that kitchen culture. So I saw sides of the London, I guess, environment that everyone talks about, but I guess I didn't live through it, and I'm very grateful for that.
What brought you back to Australia?
COVID. So I've been travelling a lot over the last 7-8 years, but I guess from where I was in London at that time, I've been at Peg for a year, and I was about to take over a residency at P. Franco, which was an incredible career move, and I was super excited to, I guess, step out onto my own. I think it was a very daunting idea to go from being a sous chef at Peg and really loving what I was doing to being, I guess, in charge solely of what I was cooking. But I was really excited by that idea. And then COVID hit. So I was due to take over in April, and I think, it was March. I came home. So I was in Belgium. I was at Champs Separés doing a stage. I just had a couple of months before P. Franco was starting, so I wanted to get a bit more experience. So I was over in Belgium, and they started closing everything. The restaurant got a call, and I think it was a Thursday night, and they were like, as of Friday at 5, you can't serve. Everything's closing. So I just jumped on a night bus back to London, packed up my Airbnb and just got kind of back there as quick as I could. And it was a very strange feeling. No one really knew what was going on. I was sort of in between a contract. So for me, I was like, well, if I stay and restaurants don't reopen, I'm going to be unemployed. So I decided to come home for 3 months and just waited for it to blow over. How very wrong I was. But, you know, I left with a goal of only being gone for a couple of months. I left most of my stuff over there. And I very luckily got one of the last flights before it got really, really hard to come home. So it brought me home, and I think it's the stillest I've been in a very long time.
What sort of impact did that have on you? You had the opportunity at P. Franco and it all sort of changed. How do you look back at that?
I think at the time I was pretty broken about coming home. I didn't want to be home. I thought it was just so unfair. But, you know, looking at everything else that was going on in the world, I stepped back and I was like, it doesn't really matter. It's just a job. It's just a thing. And I felt very lucky to be back home in Tassie during all of the lockdowns. And look, we very fortunately, compared to Sydney and Melbourne and many other parts of the world, didn't have it that bad down here. And it still kind of was just a slightly different style of life. And I think, you know, it was a big shock coming home from London back to that. But I also really enjoyed it, and it made me stop and think and be still. And I think, yeah, it's the stillest I've been in a very long time.
You mentioned the pop-up izakaya that you did inspired by your time in Japan. And take us over to Japan and through those experiences that you had. What was the real highlight that had an impact on you while you were in Japan?
Well, Japan has always... So my sister lived over in Japan for 6 years. So she studied her Masters in Linguistics and moved over just out of uni. So I first went over to visit, I think I was 15. I'd save up all my money and I'd go over for every holiday that I could. And I loved it over there. I think it was the food, it was the culture, it was the people, it was seeing my sister. Every time I went, we'd go to a different part of Japan. So like she was based in Nagoya in sort of central, pretty much smack bang in the middle of Osaka and Tokyo. So I'd go there and visit, and one year we went to Tokyo. The next year we went into the mountains and did skiing. The next year we went down south to Kyoto and Osaka. So every time I went and sort of immersed in a different part of Japan. But I think what was always prominent was the food. Like I loved it so much. I still do. I think it's my favorite food, and I just remember everything being so truly delicious, and you know, everyone who was cooking it was so happy and they were so passionate about what they were doing, and I guess like true artisans in what they were doing. So I was just mesmerized by it. But then I guess fast forwarding and going to work at Garage, there was a lot of the way that Luke cooked that had that influence of Japanese food. And he's got only in Tokyo, and he has that sort of background in Japan. So I guess that sort of slightly instilled it a bit more in me. And with Will as well. And then when Will was like, I'm going to open Peg, it's Japanese inspired, I want you to come and be the sous chef. And, you know, I was like, I love that food. He's like, I think it suits you really well. So I jumped at the opportunity, and I guess that really instilled the Japanese cooking in me, because that was all we did at Peg. It was very, I know it's gone through a few processes and changes since COVID, just ducking and adapting. But when I was there, it was just yakitori. We just had a grill. The kitchen itself was like, you know, 2 inductions and about a metre and a half long charcoal grill. That was it. So everything was cooked over charcoal. I learnt so much about technique and, you know, the yakitori style of cooking there. It was a baptism of fire. And then when I came home, I think Luke, very Luke way of being a very genuinely lovely person, I think he felt that I'd missed out on this opportunity at P. Franco, but he wanted me to have something that I could cook and sort of do myself. So he very much stepped back from the izakaya and just let me cook. So I ran the kitchen and he ran the floor. And it was a huge moment for me I had gone from learning and being taught by Luke to telling him what to do, or not what to do, but just be like, we're gonna cook this today. And it was, I think I grew so much in that time, which I'm really, really grateful for. And I'm really grateful for Luke for kind of giving me the opportunity to do izakaya.
Is there any dish or produce from that time with the izakaya that really stands out that you can tell us about?
Well, I think one thing that we always did at Peg was we made our own tofu out of soy milk and chickpea flour. So it was a really delicious, it was a riff on like a panisse, but we did it using soy milk, and it was a great tofu for agadashi style tofus. It wasn't like, you couldn't serve it as a silken tofu, but as a fried, it was this incredible like custardy tofu texture. So we took that idea and we made a broad bean milk tofu, and served it agadashi style, just with all of the spring veg around. And that sort of, a version of that dish has been on every single izakaya that we've done. So it was originally supposed to be a 3-week pop-up, and it became so popular we just kept extending. Hence the name Izakaya Temporary. We've kind of coined it Izakaya Not So Temporary. And it went for about 6 months. And I'm actually just about to relaunch it this January, which is exciting. So Luke is over in Japan, so unfortunately he won't be able to be part of it with me, but I'm going to relaunch it with my partner who works on the floor, and we're going to run it in a little space we've got for 3 weeks over January, which is super exciting. Feels funny to be doing it without Luke, but I'm excited to be doing it again and cooking that sort of food again. It really does feel like my favourite type of cooking.
When was the seed planted to create your own events company, and what's it been like building it?
The seed was kind of planted, I guess. I was working at Diamaker, and I got offered a role with Dave. Actually, he asked me to go up to Harvest in Newrybar. They needed a head chef, and I wasn't really sure if I wanted to live in Byron. But I decided to take the risk and say yes to the opportunity in classic nature. And I ended up that way, but to be honest, it just wasn't the right role for me. And I wasn't, I guess I'd gone up with the notion that it might not be. But I guess working in it was, it's an incredible restaurant. And I think the changes that Dave's made over there in the last couple of years are great. But for me personally, it wasn't what I wanted. It was that sort of fast-paced, I guess, you're pumping out food, which is great, but I guess it was kind of almost felt like being back as an apprentice in the sort of looking at all the food I wanted to be cooking, but I couldn't get there because we were so busy. So I decided that I didn't want to do that role, but moving back to Tassie, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to work. So I thought, why not just start my own thing? And I guess I didn't want to be locked in to a restaurant or a site and kind of have that commitment of being here, solely here. So I thought of the idea of just doing events and doing pop-ups and just sort of being, I guess, a chef for hire. And since I've made that decision, it's actually been great. I've opened up to so many jobs and pop-ups, and it's been really great so far.
Well, take us into the world of this events company that you have. A little bit about the food and the sort of events that you're pulling together.
Well, the food, I guess I've gone along, what I'm trying to promote is that the food is based purely on seasons and purely on the produce that is around. But I guess I'm trying not to lock it too much into a cuisine, and I'm trying not to just focus on cooking Japanese because it's what I always fall back to. So I guess I'm trying to, with all of the different experience in the different restaurants that I've worked in, allow the guests to choose what they'd like, rather than me just having a set menu of being like, these are the 4 canapes I offer and the 3 mains, and you've got to pick 1 or 2. I guess I want to create an event space that's more fluid and more based around the seasons and based around like, hey, like this is what's available today. And I guess it's a bit of a hard sell because sometimes people want very specific, they want menus printed weeks in advance and all those sort of things. But yeah, so far so good. I did some events recently up in Noosa with David Moyle. We were doing Veuve Clicquot, so they hired us to do a dinner each. I'd do one night, Dave would do the second, and we'd rotate over 5 groups of people. So we're up there for 10 nights cooking, and my menu was entirely seafood based, and Dave's was around the garden, which was really fun. Was recently over at Summertown Aristologist doing a little izakaya temporary pop-up over there. I spent some time in Auntie in Sydney, which was incredible. I guess just being open to just sort of whatever anyone is needing, and I think it's a very good time at the moment. There's definitely a shortage for hospitality staff, and particularly chefs. So I guess for me, just to be free and open to go anywhere, it's kind of working out well for me. Like, I am able to go to Auntie for 5 weeks and help out because I don't have a job, I'm not tied to a restaurant. Or I'm able to go up to Verve and cook for 12 days because I'm not tied down. So it's been really enjoyable just having that flexibility.
Tasmania has incredible produce. It's also known for producing incredible wasabi as well. With your Japanese direction with your food, have you had connections with wasabi farmers there?
Yeah, I have. There's a really great farm down here called Shima Wasabi. So they're based up in the north of the state, and they're an incredible product. So not only, I think a lot of people think of wasabi and you just think of the root, which is delicious and it's great, but they also sell the stem and the leaf, which is 2 really amazing products to use. The leaf has that sort of peppery nature that you'd find in the wasabi stem, but it's this beautiful vessel to hold wrapped up seafood. Or I used it recently at the Verve event, actually. I took up a heap of wasabi leaves and did it with grilled prawns, smoked creme fraiche and Maya lemon kosho as just like a little sort of wrap the leaf around. It's great. It's such an amazing product. And I think the climate down here is really good for it to grow.
This time that you found in the new role and being still more, has it allowed you to approach your craft differently? And are you cooking differently as a result of it?
I think so, in that I have more time to think about the way things cook, or like just trying new methods, and like I'm not rushing to get stuff done all the time, so I'm able to step back a little bit and create and to try new techniques and to read more. So like I've been changing a lot, and I think I've been really excited by doing this new izakaya pop-up, because part of me wants to keep it similar-ish, so because it's what people know, but the other part of me has been reading so much new books and new techniques about fermenting, and I'm like, oh, I could try this, we can do this. And I have all this time. I've got 2 months now where I can play and I can create some new products for that pop-up. So I'm really excited by having that freedom. And I think not working in restaurants, I do think I have a lot more time for thinking about adapting and changing methods and recipes and creating new stuff, which is really exciting.
Well, you've created this amazing new events company and changed the way you find work-life balance. What do you love about what you do?
I think it's the freedom and the creativity that I love the most. I think cooking is so much... There's so many different possibilities. I don't think you can ever really say you've mastered it, because there's so many techniques, so many cuisines, so many different things. I think what I find most exciting about it is there's always something to learn. So I guess I'd never get bored in cooking, because there's always something to read, or a new technique, or a new type of sauce to do, or there's so much opportunity. So I love that part of it. I also love the part of giving back to people, or to see people's reaction when you cook for them, when you host them. I think that's one really nice thing about doing these events and doing smaller events, is the connection with people. I think sometimes in the kitchen you miss the connection, or you miss the reaction that people have eating food and being hosted, and have that like hospitality environment around them. Quite often, as a chef, you're in the back, or you're in a whole different section. You don't get to see that. Whereas the spaces I've been working in recently have been really open, and you're talking through dishes with guests and explaining, how stuff's made, where stuff's grown, the person who grew the vegetable that they're eating. And it's really nice to be able to convey that story, because a lot of it gets lost. And yeah, I think that part of it I really love as well.
Well, Lily, good luck with LT events and everything that you've got on the calendar in the next year or so. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Huck.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.